Hello everyone, it's a pleasure to be back in the Emirates. I came for the conference 2 years ago. I'm in the same hotel and it's fantastic, and I really enjoy the heat, because back in the UK at the moment I left heat of 10 degrees, so it's nice to be in temperatures of 35 degrees. As you can see, what I'm going to work with on this morning is the notion of action learning, its link to knowledge creation. One of the features you will experience with this morning is I will invite you very soon to create knowledge. That knowledge becomes potentially shareable, and I would like you to feel that you are part of an experiment this morning, an experiment in order to learn, to make progress, to understand how you might work with action learning in the future. So I'm going to take you through some ideas, but mainly practices, of how to do action learning, to see its connection to knowledge creation, and through knowledge creation to see the connection to organization learning. Okay. As you can see, I'm Professor of Organization Learning at Leeds Business School in the UK. Leeds Metropolitan University, which will actually change its name. That's an interesting phenomenon. A university which is quite well known in the world is going to change its name to something else. That's an experiment. We will see what happens. The first thing I'd like you to do is I would like you to find a story to tell. So this is what I would like you to do. Can you please, you've just been issued with a notebook, and you also have a pen in front of you. Can I please ask you to take the pen and to take the notebook? Take the pen and take the notebook. This is not going to be a test of English. You can write in Arabic or any other language that you care to use. Now, you're going to write something down. It's important to write because you're going to articulate. And the articulation becomes more visible if you write it down. And because I don't want you to start feeling depressed too quickly, we're going to start with something positive. And therefore, what I would like you to do first of all, at the top of the page, I'm going to make the assumption that everyone in the room is at work somewhere. Not now, but part of your daily life is to go to work. So therefore, it is highly likely in your life at work, you can think of something which I would call really good work practice. Really good work practice. It is either by yourself or some other people that you know. The crucial feature of the really good work practice is you can write about it. So therefore, at the top of the page, can you write down in 2 or 3 words the example that you wish to use of really good work practice? Really good work practice. Can you write it down at the top of the page, please? Remember, you are articulating and you are going to share this with other people. Really good work practice. It's something that has worked. It's an exemplar of what is good about where you are working. It's an example of something that you are happy to talk about, which is positive. Can you write it down at the top of the page? Once you have found the example, you have 3 steps to record, and I would like you to write this as a short story. A short story. That is, I do not want you to use bullet points or quick brainstorming. I want you to write a short story. You'll see why when you have completed the exercise. So, first of all, I want you to say what happened that made it really good work practice? What happened that made it really good work practice? One sentence. You've thought of an example. What happened? Summarize in one sentence, one line, what made it really good work practice? And as I said, you can write in English, you can write in Arabic, you can write in any language that you care to use. The main thing is you write it as a story or narrative rather than quick language, bullet points. The second feature, step 2. Step 1 is what happened. The second feature, how did the really good work practice happen? How did it happen? And why did it happen? How did it happen? What were people doing? What were people doing and why were they doing it? So the question why asks you to explain what was happening, how it was happening, and why. And I would like you to write 2 sentences. 2 sentences. So the story continues. The story is continuing. Remember, this is a positive story. It works. You are revealing to yourself what is going on, how it is going on, and why. Now you're reflecting at the same time. So this is a reflective exercise which you are completing. But we're being positive. So the first sentence is what happened. The second and third sentences are how and why. And it's a short story emerging. I could let you write for the next 30 minutes, but I won't because we haven't got time this morning. The crucial thing that's happening is you are revealing knowledge. It's on the page in front of you. Now the third part of the exercise, the third step, is to say to yourself, okay, so what? So what? I want you to answer the question, what are the implications of this really good work practice for others in the company or organization that you work in? What are the implications of this good practice for others in the company, others in the organization? And you may write a bullet point. It's answering the so what question. Because what you are now raising is the potential for action. The potential for action. Of course, just because you have written it down on the page doesn't mean the action will happen. It's still an articulation. So, the crucial features of this exercise initially is you have created knowledge. What we do with it soon will be clearer, and how it forms part of action learning you will understand when we do it. But so far we've just revealed knowledge. And the crucial steps in this first exercise, because I have another exercise in a moment, but hopefully by completing this exercise, and I can see some people smiling, you feel happy. Do you agree? Do you agree? Nod your heads. It's a happy exercise. And that's how I like to begin, because in a moment I'm going to make you depressed. Well, let's wait. Let's wait and see what happens. Crucially, knowledge in organizations has always been subject to 2 possibilities. I'm just going to, this is a little bit of theory, so just very quickly, I don't want to spend too long on theory, but most of the time in many organizations, we prefer to be logical and scientific. Or on the left-hand side, we believe in analysis, reason, logic and proof. And we believe in theory and models. And we believe that we can do this by being clear through abstraction and decontextualization. And the scientific world has been very good at this. And this is how we have made progress. But what I also want you to realize, that much of our life we spend using what is called narrative, storytelling. Think of what you do at home every evening. Think of what life is like most of the time at work. And we are telling stories to each other. We're using narrative. Now, one of the words which I accept will be quite difficult to translate, the word verisimilitude, which in English means something like the truth, rather than absolute truth. Verisimilitude. If you learn nothing else this morning, you will go away today and understand the English word verisimilitude. Most of my sessions, people leave knowing 2 or 3 words that they didn't know before they came in. This is one of them, verisimilitude. What's important about narrative is good stories are inspiring and they make sense to us. And what I also want you to see is they are contextual. They capture part of where you were or where you are. So the story you wrote already was about your own world. It may not apply to any other part of the UAE or any other part of the world. So storytelling is fantastic for capturing meaning in a local context. And the other part of a story, it is personal rather than impersonal. Personal rather than impersonal. So one of the features of action learning you're going to experience is we do talk in a personal way. We are less concerned with theory, big theory. We are more concerned with little theory, which is theory that is meaningful to people where they are in a time and place. Because the purpose is to change action, to change practice. And people will do that if they find meaning and sense in what is going on. So one of the crucial features about knowledge in organizations is the connection between little knowledge and big knowledge. Because we do like to feed the idea that we can feed knowledge from practice into something meaningful for the whole organization. So I make the distinction between little knowledge and big knowledge. And on the left-hand side, we have big knowledge. On the right-hand side, we have little knowledge. They go together. It's not one or the other. It is how they work together which is important in organizations. And here's my final slide before we do some more practice. There's a great conundrum in knowledge in organizations of how we get knowledge creation moving from top to bottom and bottom to top. This particular image is of the triangle. The triangle is an ancient image that we captured from life in the ancient world, started in Egypt, of course, with the pyramids. This is our typical view of organizations, top to bottom. But what I really think is important to understand is there is a distinction between knowledge at the top and what I call the knowing base of the organization. The knowing base where interactions occur on a daily basis. So, what we also know is that people at the top have pressure. People at the top have pressure to make decisions from outside the organization. They have shareholders, they have stakeholders, they have politicians, they have significant players who all put pressure on the leaders. But the crucial part is whether that translates into organizing at the same time as understanding how knowledge is being created. This is the conundrum, and it's something that I think action learning can be very helpful with. Here's another image before we get back to practice. This is my image of an organization. It takes the shape of a river. The river is more useful in some respects than a triangle. Why? Because the river is moving continuously. It's in flow. Most of life in an organization is in flow. It isn't static. So the river flows, therefore more meaningful as an organization. In addition to the flow is what's happening below the surface. In a river, you can see what's happening on top, but you can't really see what's happening below the surface. So the flow may be serene and quiet on top, but turbulent below. That becomes quite possible. Also, we do know that a river is formed by the river bed and the river banks. So the river bed and the river banks we can see as history and culture. History and culture have a strong effect on the flow of the river. The river banks, the river bed determine the flow. In an organization, history and culture are the river banks and the river bed. They can determine the flow for good or for ill. And crucially, we have to understand this if we are going to make progress in the world that we live in. So, let's continue. Let's continue. The second exercise I would like you to do is a little bit more miserable. You've had the positive story. I would like you now write in the same way, on the same page, or start a new page. Can you find from your work practice, from your life at work, from the life that you lead, which is work related, if you want to talk about home life, that's up to you. I can't stop you. But my preference is that we talk about work, wherever we work. I have one student in the room. I know he is on sabbatical for a year. He can talk about his studying, because that's his work at the moment. Okay? So work is whatever work you are doing on a daily basis. And at the moment, everyone has a difficult work problem they are facing. Something which is troubling, something which is not working as it ought to. Can you identify that issue? Because that is the problem you are willing to share. Can you do that first of all? So in the first exercise, you identify something that was working. Now you are identifying something that is not working. But it's your problem. It is a problem you are willing to share. It is equally knowledge that you are articulating. Can you first of all write it down? Remember, you are willing to share this. Who are you willing to share it with? You are willing to share it with people you are sitting with on the table today, some of whom you do not know yet. So therefore, be careful. Be careful. So, here we go. What has been happening? What have you done? How have you felt? What has been happening? And I want 2 or 3 sentences. 2 or 3 sentences. Tell the story. What has been happening? What have you done? How have you felt? That is, how do you feel about what's happening? 1 or 2 words will do. Now, I do recognize that when you ask people to articulate their feelings in different cultures, that becomes more or less possible. In some cultures, they do not like to talk about feelings. Therefore, 1 or 2 words will be sufficient. But if it's a problem at the moment, you do have some emotions and some feelings and some thoughts. You may feel very angry, for example. You may feel very sad. You may feel very unhappy. Alternatively, you may feel fed up and annoyed. So crucially, it's a difficult work problem, a DWP, difficult work problem, but you are now declaring it to yourself. It has been happening. What have you done? There's a bit of history to the story. Already you've been doing something. Perhaps you've been doing nothing, and perhaps that's the problem. So what have you been doing? Nothing. How do you feel about doing nothing? Annoyed. And then you conclude the story, the short story, by writing 2 sentences that begin with the words, I believe that. Conclude the story, finish your thoughts about the problem by writing 2 sentences. This is your conclusion, and I want you to see it's how you see the problem. This is your belief about the problem. So, what do we have? We have a difficult work problem that you have identified. You are willing to share it. You are willing to share it. The next act you will do will be to share the problem. You have articulated a little bit about what has been happening. You have articulated what you have been doing. And you have said how you felt. You have said how you felt. You have finished the story with a conclusion. Every story has a conclusion. And the conclusion summarizes what you believe about what is happening and how you have felt. I believe that. I believe that we cannot find a way forward. I believe that my colleague is telling the untruths or lies. You decide, I believe I am weak at the moment. It is some view you have about the problem. Now, let me now just give you a short piece of understanding about the place of action learning in knowledge creation. What has to happen for knowledge creation? Knowledge creation always begins with individual learning. You cannot bypass this. Individual learning is always the starting point in creating knowledge. And individuals, most of the time, create knowledge and learning from experience, from doing something, from living and taking action. That knowledge, if it doesn't go anywhere, remains purely personal knowledge. It becomes personalized, where people hold on to knowledge but don't share it with anybody else. So it stays in the box, which I call pure personalization. For knowledge creation to occur, the learning, the knowledge has to be articulated for sharing with others. What you did was articulate knowledge, 2 types of knowledge: knowledge about what's working and knowledge about a problem. So you have already done this. Would you believe you could already be joining this knowledge together, and you could improving practice in your organizations by simply sharing that knowledge? One way of doing that is action learning. It becomes codified when the cycle is complete, when your change in a practice, your change at work, becomes accepted, in which case we can then record it as codified knowledge which other people can access. So if you change, I heard one of the actions taken was to take action to talk to his line manager about reducing the queues at his office. If he actually changes the practice, that may be recorded as the practice to change, to deal with queues in the office, and therefore it becomes codified, and it's improved practice at work. So knowledge creating at an individual level can work like this, but for organization learning to occur, it has to move through groups to the organization level. So one of the crucial things I'm going to start to take you into now is how knowledge which works at an individual level becomes part of a group process and then becomes part of an organization process. Now this is a very, very difficult process to do because most people here work in larger organizations. It's relatively easier to do in smaller organizations, but in larger organizations it's quite difficult. So what we are going to do is learn how action learning fits. Then you are going to practice again. And crucially, what I want to happen is that all of you leave here today with action to take, but also with a potential strategy to take action learning into your organizations in all sorts of different ways. Because for me, it is the most effective way of changing practice in organizations. So what you can see, we have to move from the individual box in the bottom right-hand corner to the top, sorry, the bottom left-hand corner, pure personalized, to the top right-hand corner, where the organization has codified knowledge. If it's codified at an organization level, it means it becomes part of everyone's understanding, and it also becomes available for decision making by senior managers. So crucially, you can have knowledge which moves from the bottom to the top, as well as from the top to the bottom. And this is really what, for me, is crucial for organization learning. You've already heard about Reggie Evans. I'm not going to say too much more, but Reggie Evans is accepted as the originator of what I call traditional action learning. Traditional action learning. What you did today was partly traditional action learning. And it works for many people very well for the rest of their lives. There's no reason, if traditional action learning works well for you, why should you change it into something else? So Reggie Evans has been a very influential figure in Europe, but particularly in the UK and Belgium, would you believe? He went to Belgium and helped them change the strategy of the government. That was in the early 1960s. But traditional action learning is really what most people regard as based on the work of Reggie Evans. First of all, Reggie Evans was a scientist. He worked at the Cavendish laboratories in the 1920s. And he worked with people like Rutherford, who's a very famous scientist in Manchester. What's important, he thought like a scientist, even though he worked in management and business. And one of his most famous equations, or his most famous ideas, is this idea that learning must be equal to or exceed the rate of change. Now, I quite like this because it becomes understandable. Most of what's happened in the Emirates and Dubai you've had rapid change and you've learned as you've gone along. I think you're fantastic for that. It's been really fantastic to see what has happened in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and last 2 weeks ago I saw what was happening in Oman. So I know in this part of the world you have been learning fast. But crucially, you've been changing fast, but crucially you need to be learning. Sometimes the learning you've had is catch-up learning. Catch-up learning. You make the change and then you see what you've learned. That's good as well. But actually, to be proactive, if you pay attention to your learning, you can be more creative and you can control the rate of change better. So learning must be greater than the rate of change is one of his most famous formulas. Here's another one. Learning equals the combination of P, or programmed instruction, plus Q, which refers to questioning insight. Now what he meant by programmed instruction, or what is written here, programmed knowledge, is knowledge which we already know. Knowledge which is already in existence. It is written by people like me and the other professors and doctors in the room. Every time they write about practice, for practice in business, in organizations, this is programmed instructions. Now, what's important about this is that we know programmed instruction or programmed knowledge is vast. And with the last 20 or 30 years, with the sharing of knowledge by the internet, we know there is so much knowledge in the world which is programmed instruction. The question becomes, how do we access it? How do we find the right knowledge?